All right, so we're going to go over the presentation in scroll motion today. I'm going to cover this a couple different ways. One, we're just going to give you a presentation, and then also I'm going to go through and show you where all the pieces and parts that pop up and move around are. We're going to be following along with the breakdown of the presentation, the 6 different sections, and how each individual section builds upon the next to create a basic presentation that will allow the merchant to see the true value in what our product and everything is. So before I even get into the actual visual part of the presentation, let's talk about when you set the appointment. Setting an appointment while prospecting is to have a set time and a set date for you to go back and sit down with the merchant to find out what their true needs are. A couple of things before you even go out to do your first presentation is listen to this presentation quite a few times. I do kind of look at this as like your favorite movie or your favorite song. You don't just listen to them once and that's it. You listen to them continually. And to be a professional, to be an individual who wants to be at the top echelon of sales, you will want to practice your craft over and over again. So with that being said, you're going to be Joe, a guitar shop owner. I'm going to come in and just kind of give you a presentation. So the night before you do your presentation, you want to spend a few minutes and go online and look up Joe's Guitar Shop or whatever the name of the business is that you're going to see. And just take 5 minutes, find out a little bit about them, read the About Us page, maybe there's some cool, interesting facts. Just get to know them a little bit. It only takes a few minutes and most people don't do this. So I'm going to pretend I'm walking back in. So as I'm walking back in, one of the things I want to make sure that I do is always expect to write the sale. I always want to show up on time, and I always want to be ready to go. Make sure I have all of the proper materials that I need. Even though everything is stored within scroll motion, I want to make sure it's all there for you. So when I come walking back in, hey Joe, nice to see you again. Hey, listen, did you want to do this up front or did you want to go in the back where it's a little more private? You want to go in the back? Fantastic. Go to the back. Hey Joe, now before we really get started here today, one of 3 things will usually happen when we finish. Number 1 is either you look at my program or I may look at your program and you can say, you know what, I'm going to stay where I'm at, or I may look at you and say, I can't help you. Would you be okay with that outcome? You would? Okay, great. Second thing is that maybe I have to do maybe a request for information or a proposal or something along those lines. If that were the case, then we would set a definite time and date for us to meet for another visit. Does that sound good? Great. And the third thing, this is what usually happens, is we see the value in working together. And when I'm finished with the presentation, we'll just spend about 5 or 6 minutes and go through the application process, need one signature and a voided check. That's about it. Does that all sound fair? Great. So Joe, before I really get started, let me ask you, what got you into the business? And at this point, the merchant's going to go through and give me quite a bit of idea of what it is that they've done, how they've started, and I'm going to go through a questioning strategy that I'll pull up on the screen here. There's 3 questions that I've asked on every presentation from the beginning of time. Number 1, what got you into this business? Number 2, I guess that would be 2, would be, what do you like about your current system? And the third question I've always asked is, if you could change anything about your system or your situation, what would it be? Now, mixed in there, I do throw in quite a bit more questions, like, how much your business is on plastic? How much of that plastic is debit cards? Do you ever do refunds for people? Have you ever had paper run out while you're in the middle of a shift? Do you ever do trade shows? Do you do mobile processing? Do you have an internet presence? All of these kinds of questions are just simply fact-finding, and you'll see a link for being able to download that within the video here as well. But asking these questions up front allows the merchant to kind of slow down a little bit, and it allows you as an agent to slow down a little bit as well. So I'm going to go back into the presentation. So Joe, thank you for telling me a little bit about yourself. Now that I know a little bit about you, let me tell you a little bit about me so you know who you're going to be doing business with today. My name's Tom. I live right down the street. I'm your local rep. Matter of fact, do you have your cell phone handy? Let me give you my number. It's 317-987-2386. Just give me a call. So before I got into the merchant services business, I had a luggage company, and I would travel about 42 weeks out of the year, and that's a lot. I wanted to find something that would keep me local so that I could help give back to the merchants and the individuals in my local territory. So besides that, have you ever heard of AdvoPay before I walked in the other day? You haven't? Okay, great. Well, let me just tell you one thing, as I'm kind of new at this. So during this presentation, if there's some questions that come up, that maybe I don't know the answer to. We've got about 100 years of experience sitting back in our office. So at that point, if there's anything that I don't have the answer to, I'm going to pick up the phone and call them. Is that okay? Okay, fantastic. So let me get into AdvoPay. So AdvoPay was originally started in 2010. And we really wanted to build a platform kind of from the ground up that gave customers kind of some flexibility. So many times people had been, dealing with one company for their e-commerce, and another company for their mobile processing, and another company for their trade shows, and another company for their storefront. So we wanted to basically kind of bring an omni-channel protected system into play for any type of merchant. So before we even started actually processing payments, we polled about 5,000 merchants, and we wanted to find out what the big problems were with merchant services. Now, the first big problem people said is bad customer service. And bad customer service is nothing new to anybody else. But number two is what we like to call waiting on your money, okay? And number three is what we call the confusion factor. And these big three prompted us to build our network and build our program in a manner that kind of combats these. So as we all know, customer service, you only use them when you need them, and it should be somebody that you can get along with. But basically the business world really spoke. And they said, hey, look, it's 2018. Is there a way that I can get my funds faster than 3 or 4 or 5 days? And there is. And then the confusion factor, we're going to get into that when we talk about the accounting package. But a lot of individuals they don't know what they're paying. And it's one of the biggest expenses in your business, and you should really understand it. Wouldn't you agree? Absolutely. So basically the business world spoke, and they said we want something that's simple, something that's safe, and something that's secure. Instead of being status quo, improving on that status quo. And in a nutshell, helping to grow, arm, and protect that business. And we're going to help you grow it if I give you the knowledge and the tools to be able to sell anywhere, anytime, to anybody. And help arm your business with some omni-channel protection, some tokenization, some encryption that will effectively make your transactional data disappear, as well as protecting you. You got to have somebody that's behind you. Basically, we're going to fill the gap that other people have missed. So just like you, some Fortune 500, some very large companies in the U.S., they're just like you. They're our customers. And these are individuals that wanted a system just like what you want, which is something that's compliant, something that's tokenized, something that's encrypted, a system that basically you put it in and you don't have to think about it. Is that kind of where you're at too? Fantastic. So usually about this point, people kind of say, hey, Tom, I have really 2 questions. And the first question that they usually ask me is what's this going to cost me? And the second question they ask me is what's the rate? So to kind of get into this, what's it going to cost me? We don't charge anything up front. I mean, I take tips, but the real question people get into is what's your rate? And I'm going to show you now why that's really the wrong question to be asking, because it's not what's my rate, is what's it going to cost me in the long run. And if you look at a company like Target, for example, I'm pretty sure they had a pretty good rate. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah. But what did it cost them to not protect their cardholder data? Billions of dollars, and that's not good. So let's look at the real pulse of the industry itself. So we found when we were polling people that individuals like yourself, they have a problem in one of these 5 basic areas: billing, service, communication, security, and technology. So within each of these, the first part is billing concerns. And a lot of people really expressed a lot of frustration. What do I pay? Am I on a tiered pricing structure, a flat rate? What's this qualified? What's this mid-qualified? What's interchange? All these new terms, because it doesn't matter how good a business owner is, nobody ever teaches you about merchant services. And another thing is reconciliation, accessing your data. So many companies nowadays have made it almost impossible to figure out what you're paying and where you get your own data. It's your data after all. And then every April and every October, interchange is increased, decreased, moved to the side, added new categories. Who's really communicating that? And that was a big concern of a lot of customers. Service issues that people have had. One of the big ones is chargebacks. And the system itself is pretty archaic. The cardholder says it wasn't me. They call their issuing bank. The issuing bank then calls the network. The network then contacts the merchant. And the merchant has, you get one of those little envelopes that say merchant services. Most people don't open them. But it's a request for information. And this whole snail mail thing is really kind of archaic. And a lot of people express concern over that as well. A couple other things like the case of the disappearing rep and really a lack of self-guidance. And a lot of people had expressed that, hey, look, I run a business. I don't have time to wait on hold. Can't you have some kind of a portal or some way that I can figure things out on my own? And that's something that was very concerning to people. The other thing is communication. With all the recent mergers and acquisitions in our industry, a lot of people have missed statement messages with rate increases, some organizational changes. One of those big ones was MasterCard. MasterCard came out with a card because they ran out of numbers that starts with a 2 now. And merchants like yourself that so many aren't even aware of this, but you can be fined up to $20,000 per day if you don't have the ability to accept those transactions. And people haven't been communicated this. The other issue that people have is security. EMV, these little chip cards. It's supposed to be the be-all, end-all, right? Chip's going to save us. Yeah. What's it really done? Slowed down lines. And it's caused some malfunctions, but it's really upped the card-present fraud in the U.S. simply because people are still using cards like this, but they all have the mag stripe on the back. And until that's changed, there's some big issues. But data security is really on everybody's mind now. Whether it's a small hot dog vendor or a company like Walmart, you've got to protect your entire business with the security. So the last part there that people had really a problem with is really the technology. Because let's just face it, you want to swipe a card or dip a card or tap a phone or a watch and get your money the next day. You don't want to wait. If a system is too complex, who's going to use it? If it becomes obsolete super quick, well, it's kind of a waste of money. But one of the biggest concerns people expressed to us was they wanted something that would not interfere with their organizational efficiency. Meaning, yes, it's going to be a little different, but can it be about the same? Can I just swipe the card and get my money? Because they wanted a system that would allow them to have some flexibility with security, because it is important, but at the same token, not completely changing how they do business. It's really about finding a balance between safety, something that's easy, and something that's user-friendly. Okay? So basically, when you look at where we're at in the industry, this is kind of what we built our entire program off of, was these 5 basic points that people were having issues with. So let's get into the next part here. And we're going to talk about some of the liability section and some of the things that happen in the industry that, as of right now, a lot of business owners really kind of have, not the real story, if you will. So let's talk about EMV real quick. So EMV is supposed to be, the be-all, end-all with the little chips. The problem is that here in the U.S., we adopted what is called chip and signature. Now, chip and signature sounds pretty good, but the problem is watch this. I just signed my name. Okay, let's watch this. I just signed my name again. I just signed my name again. Do they look the same? No. Because there are 1,000 ways to sign your name. Okay? Over in Europe, they did chip and pin. Because how many pin numbers do you have on your ATM card? 1. The reason is that as EMV was designed back in the early 90s, is that the card never leaves the card holder's hand. If you've been to Europe, you already know, you go to a restaurant, for example, and you order some food at the end, you don't hand your card to somebody and then disappear. They bring the terminal, the processing system to you, and you put the card in, initiating that transaction for that card holder. That's what makes EMV a truly safe thing, is chip and pin. But until the U.S. adopts chip and pin, we've got some issues. But there was a liability shift that took place in October of 2015. And this liability shift was pretty basic. If you have a card come into your location with a mag stripe and it's ran through a mag stripe terminal, well, the card issuing bank is responsible for counterfeit and or fraudulent activity. If you have a card that only has a mag stripe on it, you run it through an EMV system, the issuer is also same thing. That's how it's always been. Now we come into the problem, is that if somebody walks through your door with an EMV card and you swipe it instead of doing the dip, you are 100% liable for all counterfeit and fraudulent activity. A lot of people don't even realize that. Matter of fact, only 39% of the businesses in the U.S. have the ability to take these type of cards the correct way. Well, rest assured, when we finish your application and enroll you in our program, we'll make sure you're set up to be able to accept the EMV and some of the other newer forms of payment as well. But EMV didn't really protect anybody from breaches. They don't protect the primary account numbers. It's still on the mag stripe. They don't protect expiration date, and they still leave your business vulnerable to fraud. The only true protection in the state of processing right now is to have something that is not only tokenized, but also has an encryption technology within it. And what does all that mean? Let's kind of break this down. Tokenization is kind of the easy one. If you've ever been to like a arcade, for example, you go to an arcade, you put $20 in, they give you a bunch of little tokens. That's a token, changing one thing into another thing. That's it. And what is encryption? Encryption is kind of funny. I look at it like this. For example, your car out front. If I knew how to steal cars, could I steal your car? Yeah. What's the only way to make sure I can't steal your car? Not an alarm system. A lot of people say that, but just to make your car not be here. But that's not very practical, is it? So what we do with encryption is we take that token and we wrap it in kind of an invisibility cloak. If you've ever seen the movie Harry Potter, you'll know what I mean. You put a cloak on, you disappear. You're still there, but it's gone. And that's what we effectively do with your transactional data. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So let's talk about this liability. When I hand you a credit card, what is your risk? How long are you on the hook for? Most people say as soon as I get an approval. Unfortunately, that's incorrect. The card issuing banks protect their cardholders for up to 180 days. That means from the time that a card is swiped, dipped, or tapped within a location, the cardholder has 180 days to say, what, me? Didn't do it. Didn't like it. Whatever. It doesn't matter. And this is a problem. Now you know this. I know this, but who's always known this is the thieves and the bad people. Because that 180 days, that 6-month window, that gives them a long period of time to be able to do what I'm going to tell you now. Because the biggest form of fraud right now is not breaches. That's what makes the news. It's not hacking, okay, like the Home Depot, but it's rather a thing called skimming. And if you look at the video here from ABC News, this goes through a little bit of some skimming scams that are happening in locations. So, time out. I'm not going to show you the video, but there's a few sections within this thing that will show you, in particular the ones with McDonald's, where the guy's stealing 70 cards per shift. Insane. It's really good information. But the biggest form of fraud now is skimming. And skimming is this, they can do it in many, many ways. You can take a picture, you can write down a card number, you can use an electronic skimmer and do it as well. And the reason this is such a bad thing is because if you look at the state of our cards right now, in the front of the card you got a bunch of numbers. Back of the card you got a mag stripe. Some cards you have a little chip on it. So, let me just ask you this. If I give you my card and you swipe it, I want to buy that $10,000 Les Paul up there on the wall. Okay? I give you my card. What do? You swipe it through the machine? Okay, great. What happens next? I ask you for the dollar amount. What happens next? Receipt prints out. What happens next? I sign it and I'm out the door. Right. What in your current system is checking the validity of the card? Nothing. What I mean by that is, how do you know that what's written on the front of the card or imprinted on the front of the card or the back on it, some discovers, matches what's magnetically imprinted on here? Nothing. So kind of jog your memory now. When you go to a larger box store, even if you swipe your own card, what do? They ask to see it. Why? Because after you swipe it, they're asking for the last 4 digits. They're just trying to verify what's on the front of the card matches what's on the back of the card. And if it doesn't, it just stops the transaction. It's that simple. This is what these thieves and these bad people do, is they go around and they look for stores like yourself that don't take the chip cards. And they go into stores that don't have any sort of security, and they look for high-ticket items that they can easily sell. That's a big problem. Rest assured, when we finish your application enrolling in our program, even if I use your existing hardware, I'm going to put what's called fraud control or last 4 in place, even with your existing system. So, I'm going to show you why this is such a big deal. Let's say I buy that $10,000 Les Paul. Your current system doesn't check any validity, and I walk out the door with this. All of a sudden, the cardholder gets their credit card statement. And they say, 10 grand? I never bought anything at Joe's Guitar Shop. So they then pick up the phone and they file what's called a dispute. They call their issuing bank, hey, it wasn't me, I didn't buy anything. Matter of fact, the card's still in my wallet. There's no way that was me. I wasn't there. Blah, 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 blah. You get that little envelope in the mail. Now you have to go and you have to find 2 things. You have to find a copy of the credit card processing slip, and you have to find a copy of an invoice. Okay? Or what we like to call the proof that something that was bought. Okay? So your credit card slip, you're looking at that. You see on here it says a swipe transaction. You see a signature. You think you're pretty good. What I'm going to tell you now is what nobody wants you to know. What are they looking for? The card issuer is looking for 3 things. They're looking for proof that the card was authorized to be used. Okay? And that can be done through a swipe or dip or a tap. They're looking for proof that goods or services were delivered in a timely manner. That's what that invoice is for, what we like to call the sales slip. That proof that the cardholder consented to use that card at that location on that date for that amount of money. Okay? And that can be done through a signature or of a keyed-in transaction through ABS, CVV2, and some IP velocity things that we can do. Anyway, to get back into this, is that when you get this little thing in the mail that says, hey, I need all this, you got to stop everything you're doing. You got to go find your credit card slip. You got to find your sales slip. You go and you make copies. Never send the originals, and you send it into the issuer. You're thinking, hey, man, all's good. I got a copy of the slip. The card was swiped, and it was signed, and we're good. However, did you swipe the actual card, or did you swipe a counterfeit card? Counterfeit. You automatically lost. You have proof that the cardholder, well, you thought you did, but is that the signature of the cardholder or the signature of the thief? The thief. The only thing you really have is what? An invoice showing what you just lost. Because not only did you lose the $10,000 and the fees to process that, but you also lost the cost of the goods, the overhead, the inventory, etc., all because your current system isn't checking the validity of the card. And that doesn't make sense to keep processing like that, does it? Exactly. So that's with mag stripes. Now let's talk about chippy cards. So a card that has a chip on it is even worse. If you take that chip card and instead of dipping it, which means you slide it in the little slot in the front, if you swipe it, as soon as the issuer says, I need to have a retrieval on this card, guess what? You automatically lose the chargeback if it was swiped as opposed to dip. That's why it's so important that you're accepting cards in the correct fashion. Does that make sense? Great. So some other issues that people have been expressing to us is that their company growth is really outpacing their current service. Their fungibility lag time, we'll talk about that, as well as overly complex reconciliation. But let's continue on the vein of security and securing your business operations. I want to get into PCI. PCI is extremely important. PCI stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standards. And it's just simply, there's basically a three-step process. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. So number 1 is just you got to become compliant. And this is a pretty basic thing right now. You just go online, answer a questionnaire, and you're done. I'm sure you've done it before. If not, you have a non-compliance charge on your statement. Then you got to validate. So anybody that processes on the internet, or means their computer or their system is hooked up to IP, then they have to validate. And what we try to do is just basically go into your system. If we can find some sort of a way into your system, guess what? We're going to find it. And the third thing is what's called indemnification. Now, indemnification is what I like to call human factor protection. Now, human factor protection is extremely important for a lot of people because it doesn't matter how great your technology is, even though at the point of entry, we go ahead and take that transactional data, and instead of sending out the raw data, Ingenico automatically takes and creates a token and then makes it disappear through that encryption technologies before it goes off into public, eliminating those issues. But there's one thing that your technology cannot fix, and that's what we like to call the human factor. And the human factor is real simple. Let's say little Johnny over there steals 100 credit cards. Okay? You watch the guy at McDonald's steal 70 a shift. The guy steals 100 credit cards. Let's say in 2015, it was $234 per card breached is what it cost a business owner like yourself. So they stole 100 cards, that'd be $23,400. Now, when the Secret Service investigates fraud, it's really easy. They're going to figure out the common point of entry. They're going to do a sting and figure out, hey, little Johnny over there is going to jail. However, you're responsible for all of the forensic investigation costs, everything, the breach costs, the fines, all the way down to the plastic card replacement costs. So let's say it's an additional $7,000 in forensic investigation, and we're at $30,400. If the Secret Service walks through your door today and says, hey, you owe me $30,400, how would that affect your business? Pretty bad, wouldn't it? Rest assured, when we finish your application and enroll in our program, we get you hooked up with the breach indemnification program, that if that happens, you don't have to do anything with it. Up to $50,000 of that breach coverage will take care of your business for you. Does that make sense? So as you can see, we really have a pulse on what's going on in the industry. Not only a pulse, but also what are some of the issues and how to overcome those issues. So how are we doing so far? Pretty good? Okay, great. So what I'm going to talk about next is where everybody else has to stop. And that's really talking about our fundamental values as a company. And some of the reasons that we built our company the way that we did was on these 4 items. Number 1 is security. Okay? Obviously, being secure, making sure that you can have that, what we like to call P2P, or point-to-point encryption, and that tokenization process. But also having some intelligent business management. Using some of the reporting technologies like Pivotal 360 allows you to really see your transactional data whenever and wherever you'd like to. Interchange management is huge. If you're finding that you're taking a lot of level 2 business cards or level 3 cards, we have what's called interchange optimization. And interchange optimization just changes the actual interchange level based on sending through all the required data to ensure the lowest possible interchange rate. And then transparency. I mean, plain and simple. Most individuals in your position have a hard time with merchant service companies because there's not a whole lot of transparency. Does that make sense? Yeah. So let's talk about what you've got. So to us, it doesn't matter whether you use a traditional processing on a countertop terminal, a mobile application, maybe you're doing a virtual terminal, or an integration. Maybe you want to eventually get into something like a hosted payment page, or you want to have some sort of an online presence, or maybe you want to go to something like a point of sale system like Point, which I can show you here when we're finished. Or maybe you like to just simply reprogram your existing terminal. We reprogram pretty much everything out there. Or we can even reprogram a lot of the most popular point of sale systems on the market. So as you can see, whether we use your system or ours, we want to make it simple for you. So as a company, we've helped create something with our merchants that's good, that's great. And it's really focusing on fraud prevention before it becomes an issue. Because if you look at this business, it's kind of like your automobile and a tire. When you have a flat tire, it's too late. It's already flat. The problem with this business is that when you know that you had a breach or a hack or a skimming scam, it's already too late. Nobody just calls up and says, hey, we're going to breach your network next week. It's already too late when you find out there's a problem. So making sure that you're compliant, and validated, and also have that indemnification in place as well. But finally giving you some transparency, and really future-proofing your business. If you want to process on, a mobile app, maybe you want to process online, maybe you want to do it on a tablet, you want to be able to accept all the forms of payment, whether it's a swipe, whether it's a dip using the chip, or whether it's a tap using things like near-field communication or AdvoPay. I mean, think about it. You'd have been told 10 years ago that you're going to be able to have somebody walk into your business with a phone. That phone is going to scan their face in order to authorize the transaction. You just said, we were crazy. We're here. The iPhone 10 does that right now. So as we get into the last part of this, Joe, you're going to see that the full accounting package that we have is really designed to limit the liability with some of these enhanced fraud protections, making sure that we have aggressive interchange management, doing level 2 and level 3 when needed, and then making sure you're compliant with the IRS. This is something that's really huge. It's because in 2005 this was passed. This isn't new. 6050W is really a basic thing. It's a reporting tool. The IRS said, hey, not enough people are claiming all their credit card processing, so they made us send them what's called a 1099-K. The problem with this is that it's your responsibility to make sure that your credit card processing company has the correct information on file that the IRS has. If they don't match, they can take 28% of your batch on a daily basis. When you get that money back next year, when you do your taxes, if you're entitled to a refund, then you get it back. Nobody wants to wait. So as part of our boarding process, before we even let your account come online, we verify with the IRS database to make sure that that would never happen to you. Does that sound fair? Then obviously some personal dedicated account service professionals, because I'm in the field. So there's going to be some times when I'm not going to be able to answer the phone. So we have every one of our merchants gets a direct line access to somebody in our office. So you can call up, you can say, hey hey Greg, this is Joe. I'm having an issue with blank, and he'll take care of it right there. One of the nice things that we've trained everybody to do is that if it can't be handled right now, they'll get the answer and call you back. The reason that we do this is because we know that your job is really to run your business, not your payments. That's our job. Does that make sense? Okay, great. So let's talk about some the pricing, because this is something that was brought up a little bit ago. So we do what's called interchange cost plus, but we also do what's called gross deposits. Let me explain what this is. We're what's called a full acquirer. So we process your Visa, your MasterCard, your Amex, and your Discover. Not new. Everybody does that. The difference is that when you have your Visa, MasterCard, and Discover, and your American Express, and they're in a batch, Everybody does that. But what generally happens is American Express disappears. And 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days later, you get your American Express. So with us, we found that one of the issues that people had was waiting on their funds. So we wanted to create a program that would allow people to, let's say you process $13,456.18 for the day. You should be able to, if you meet our cutoff time, which is 11 p.m., you get your 11 p.m. cutoff time. We don't care if it's a Visa, a MasterCard, an American Express, or Discover. We deposit all of your funds that following morning. Does that make sense? Fantastic. So let's talk about your pricing. You know, transparency is key. So let's first talk about you. How do you bill your customers here? Do you have, okay, so you have guitars, you have drums, and you have accessories. Do you only have 3 prices in your entire store? No. All right. Like, are all your Gibson guitars one price and all of your, Gretches are another price and all your Fenders are another price? No, that wouldn't make any sense. That's the most common type of billing that's out there in the market. And that's a common practice called tiered, or what they like to call bucket pricing. When you look at your statement, you'll see things like qualified, mid-qualified. You're shaking your head. That's what you're on. Most people are on that, and most people have been on that. Do you charge the same price for everything in your store? Meaning, okay, so I know that Les Paul's 10 grand. So do you charge $10,000 for a set of guitar strings? No, you wouldn't be in business, would you? It doesn't make sense to have your billing like that. But credit cards are like that. Then the other one is called what we like to call ERR. This is the worst kind. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say ERR means you get billed multiple months for the same transaction. It's like me buying that Les Paul and you coming and saying, Tom, it's $100. And I'm like, heck yeah, I want 2. Then you call me next month and say, hey, Tom, I didn't cover my costs. So in addition to that $100, I need $4,900. Okay. Then the next month after that, you call me and say, now I covered my cost of $5 grand, but I didn't make any profit, so I need you to give me another $5 grand. Now you'd be laughed out of business. This is how people are getting billed in merchant services. If you're like most people I deal with, you have a cost for an item, you put your margin on it, and you sell it for retail, right? So you have items like, for example, those Epiphone Les Pauls are $99. Your cost may be $75. Put a margin and sell it for $100. Done. That's how things should be. Shouldn't your merchant services be billed in the same way you bill your own customers? We agree. So let's talk about that. We are what's called cost plus, or what we like to call interchange, because interchange is our cost. Interchange is the same no matter what. If you're a hot dog vendor or you're a Walmart, doesn't matter. If I hand you my regulated debit card, which is my debit card, it's 5 basis points and 22 cents. It doesn't matter where it's used at. Interchange is interchange is interchange. So let's talk about how companies like us make money. It's what we choose to bill over that cost. And it can be done by lumping everything into buckets. Bad. Charging the same price for everything. You're a business person. You're not going to charge less than your highest priced item, right? Or bill customers. So let's talk about this. How much did you process last month? About $33,000? Let's go into my pricing guide. And this is going to tell us a little bit about what your pricing would be with us. So you processed $35,000, last month. That would put you in this category right here, which would put you at 45/100% over interchange. And I'm sure your average ticket's greater than $30, right? Yeah, okay. So you'd be at 12 cents. What's that mean? That means, for example, on that debit card I just mentioned, the interchange level is 5 basis points and 22 cents. We would put a margin of 45 basis points and 12 cents on there for an all-in cost of about 0.5% and 32 cents. Okay? So what does that actually mean? I'll give you a quick example. That $10,000 Les Paul, if you were on a flat rate pricing, say of 2.75, it'd cost you $275 to process that. Okay, with us, you'd be at $50.32. Not a real hard decision, is it? Exactly. So let's get back into some more of the reasons that being on a cost plus pricing structure is something that's very important for business owners like yourself. And one of those things is a thing called the Durbin Amendment. So the Durbin Amendment's not new. It was passed in 2011, so it's been around for a while. The problem with Durbin Amendment is that it affects the cost of debit transactions. So if you're paying bucket pricing, you're not paying cost. If you're paying a flat pricing, you're not paying cost. If you're paying ERR, you're not paying cost. This only applies to people that are on a true cost plus pricing structure. So what this is that in 2010, a lot of the lobby groups like the Petroleum Association, retailers, grocers, etc., got together and said, hey, credit card processing fees are ridiculously high. We need to do something about it. So Durbin picked it up. This is part of the Wall Street Financial Reform Act of 2011. They said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at the number one transaction in the U.S. And the number one transaction in the U.S. is actually a debit card. Now, is a debit card transaction credit? No, it's cash. If I hand you a $20 bill, does somebody come running from the back and say, hey, I need a quarter? No, it doesn't work like that. So why was it that previous to the Durbin Amendment passing was cash transactions costing almost the same as credit card transactions? Doesn't make sense, does it? So they did a study. They found the average debit card transaction in the U.S. is $38, and the cost was about 62 cents. Well, they wanted to find what was called reasonable and proportional to actual cost. So after many months of study, they figured out that reasonable and proportional to actual cost was about 5 basis points and 22 cents, as I just talked about a second ago. Now, what was it before that? Before that, a Visa card was 95 basis points and 10 cents. So almost a 1% decrease. So what does that mean? Let's just get to the nitty-gritty. This $38 instead of costing 62 cents now is running about 24 cents. The big difference, isn't it? But the problem is nothing in the Durbin Amendment says this price reduction must be passed along to you, the consumer. So that's okay. Rest assured, when I finish your application and enroll you in our program, we only bill on cost plus. So to give you an example, in September of 11, our merchants were paying the 95 basis points and 10 cents because that's what interchange was, plus whatever the markup was that we put on there. In October, guess what happened? It went down to 5 basis points and 22 cents. Now, as I asked you earlier, about 75% of your business is on credit, or on plastic, I should say, and about 60% of that was on debit cards. So just doing some quick math, would you notice a 1% reduction on about 10 grand? Yeah. See how this makes sense now? Fantastic. So the last part of what we're going to get into here, go on to here is how payments should actually be. Something that's simple. Providing you with security that's P2PE to tokenization, giving you transactional lifecycle reporting, access to things like the Durbin Amendment and PCI, but getting gross money. You know, if you do $13,456.18, shouldn't you have $13,456.18 in your account tomorrow? Yeah, we don't bill before we make our deposits. And speaking of billing, let's talk about that. I'm going to ask you a question, Joe. It's not really a trick question, but listen carefully. If you processed $10,000 in sales and you processed $1,000 in returns, how much did you process for the month? 9 grand. That's what I would think. But unfortunately, that's not what I asked. That's how much did you process? You processed $11,000. That's called gross billing. And this is what's been going on for years, is that you get billed when you make the sale. If you make a return, you get billed again. You may have noticed this already, especially on a high-ticket item. However, we do what's called net billing, because I live in the same world you do. If I have $10,000 and I do a $1,000 return, I only have 9 grand, right? Isn't that what you should pay your bill on? I agree. Now, being on a cost plus pricing structure, you get the same things we get. So when a transaction's reversed, what they call reverse interchange or credit refund group, that goes directly back to us from the issuer. It comes to us. Now it'll be passed along to you. And that's how it should be. Don't you agree? Great. Well, the last part here is I know I'm not the last person that's ever going to walk through your door. So from now until the end of time, you're covered under what we like to call a merchant assurance policy. And, I mean, let's face it, why would you leave me? Because somebody else comes in and says they're cheaper? Because isn't that what they all do? Great. So from now until the end of time, if anybody ever walks through your door and tells you they can do what I can do for cheaper, we will either meet that price or beat that price, or we'll pay you $500 to leave us. And we don't just say it. We put it in writing, and I'll email this to you in just a second. Does that make sense? Great. But the other thing is that for you and for me is that I'm going to finish your application and enroll you in our program. But I want you to really, for the next 60 days, evaluate me, my company, my product, and my service. Because in a nutshell, if you're not happy, we're not happy. So from now until 60 days from now, I want you to look at everything that we've done. And if it's not exactly what I said it was, just fire me. There's no penalty to leave me. And if your old processing company were to, charge you some kind of a fee to come back to them, like a conversion fee. We'll pay up to $150 for you to go back to where you were. Does that make sense? Fantastic. So are you a sole proprietor or a corporation? And at this point now I'm going to do the application. You can do the application in many ways. You can do a paper app if you print one out. You can go here and you can do what's called the power form, which will allow you to fill it out electronically. You could create a PDF right here and just email it directly over to the merchant, have them fill it out on their computer, print it out, and be done with it. So that is the entire presentation from beginning to end. We're going to go through another video and I'm going to get you some, like where's this, where's that, because there's a whole lot more to the entire presentation. If you see, you've got this whole Business 2.0 section, which covers some of our products, like the countertop terminal, the Ingenico ICT 220, how it has what's called the group on-guard point-to-point encryption that's built in. From initial swipe on an Ingenico terminal, it will protect that cardholder data, which is vitally important to people. And the neat part is that this will work on dial or IP, okay, which is really nice. But it gives you access to not only swiping the transactions over here, or dipping your card right here, but you can also use your Apple Pay or your Google Wallet, your phone, your watch, whatever, and you can just tap it and make a transaction happen, which is actually even faster than with a card. Go through a little bit about our Global One Pay or Authorized.net, preferably Authorized.net, unless they need a hosted payment page, and we'll hook them up with the Global One Pay. And then your mobile processing, again, this is super cool because you have the ability to take EMV, and Auth.net's almost done with their near field communication, which is your pay with your watch or pay with your phone mobilely, which will be very cool. And I'll update a video on that. And then your hosted payment page. We're going to have individual videos for each of these products, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them now, but you'll get the other understanding. And then finally we come to our new point of sale system, which is called Point. There's going to be a training on this individually because it's pretty cool. But this is a handheld unit that you can use at the table for restaurants. You can take it to a food truck. You can use it in a retail location. You can use it pretty much anywhere on the planet. Maybe you're at a doctor's office and you want to take payments at the table. Sorry. You're at a doctor's office and you want to take payments at, in the back room. Whatever you want to do, this thing's pretty cool. So it will help you out as well. But that is the first version of this video, and feel free to call, email, or text us with any questions. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.